Everybody to the GRadulting Workshop Series. Today's topic is all about money, right? We love that topic. I love that topic because I want to feel secure in my future. So maybe that's why you're here today, to get that security, that feeling of like, even though I'm really poor right now, someday I'm not going to be. So before we get started with the workshop, I just want to make sure you know about legal aid, because in addition to these workshops, we have an attorney on our staff, and attorneys are expensive, and y'all don't want to spend money on that when you're having a problem with your landlord, right? That is the number one reason that students come see us: tenant landlord issues. Number two issue, does anyone have a guess? That's close. That's like number three. But traffic accidents and traffic citations. So do not speed on Route 1. Just don't. And I'm a notary public. So if you need something notarized, come see me. But we do have immigration appointments with a specialized immigration attorney. And we have advocates on staff who help students that have been charged by the university. And you have already paid for all of these services. There is no excuse to not come ask for help. And even if you're not sure if we can help you, we want you to come to us anyways, because we're well connected within the university and the community. So we will do our best to help you. All right, so if you haven't signed in, please go to the back table and sign in. There's a QR code back there. It doesn't work, use the sign-in sheet. After the workshop, I'm going to send you a survey. Just take a minute to do it, please. Your feedback is so valuable. We need to make sure that we're doing a good job, that we're addressing the issues that you want us to talk about. I will send you the slides and recording by email tomorrow. So if you registered, you're going to get an email from us. And just remember to silence your phones. Okay, let's dive in. I'm going to introduce not one, but two speakers today. First up, we have John Olson. Welcome, John. He is a certified financial planner, a retirement income certified professional. He has his MBA, and he is the owner and financial advisor at 2250 Financial Services. And if that weren't all good enough, he's also on a loan. So, John, thank you so much. And John brought a special guest, another financial advisor from his firm, Marquita Hawkins. Thank you, Marquita. So let's give them a warm welcome, and I turn things over to them. Oh.
So I do have a bunch of slides, wonderful, fun rest for it. It's better when you do Q&A with the professor. You sit and listen to the lecture. I hate giving lectures. I'd much rather answer questions, and through that, I can get out a lot of stuff I want to share with you anyway. Last time I was here last year ended up being a lot of questions for an hour. So, yeah, is there any questions to start? So, yeah, go ahead. Great question. So I think the financial planning process is a great way to do anything regarding money, right? Because I mean, there might be someone in this room or listening to recording who was fortunate and didn't have student loan debt, and they got to go to school and is going to get their job, and have income, and, you know, maybe married, they got two incomes, and who knows, right? Everything's not people. Reality is most students will graduate with some debt, and then you got to manage that along with rent. And you know, if are you all grad students? Yeah, so if you're grad students, you're also likely in the stage of life where you might be considering other major life things like marriage and kids and all those other things that get wrapped in your 20s and 30s, right? So the financial planning process really is a great way to start. And I think the first thing, and I'm often amazed at how helpful this can be for people, is just an inventory of where you are. You know, what are your bills? Someone was telling me the other day, and this is not an endorsement, they had downloaded Rocket Money, and they did the whole thing where they connected to all their bank accounts and everything. And they really were surprised at how much money they were spending on subscriptions and things that they weren't aware was going out the door. I think that's just the problem of the modern world, but really taking an inventory of where you are is the first step. And if you're in school, you know, you probably have your current student debt load, but it's important to project what you will have when you graduate, so you can understand that. I know a lot of people, you get no interest while you're a student. I have not personally taken a student loan in a while, but maybe you guys can tell me, what's the current interest rate student loans come with? Bad. I've seen 6, 7, you know, in that range. Sometimes if you can prepay loans while you're in school, or at least take care of the interest, because the interest will get woven in with the. If you take out, you know, 50K of loans while you're a student, and it's accruing interest while you're a student, that gets deferred, right? You don't have to pay. Let's say it's $5,000 worth of interest. When you graduate, whatever it's 2 or 3 months later, when they figure out your student loan payment and all that, they're going to take the deferred interest and wrap it into your principal. So now you're going to have $55,000 of loans that's now accruing interest at that rate. Sometimes if you can just keep up with the interest while you're a student. And that may not be true depending on your loan status. There's 8 different ways you can get student loans or whatever, but and then, has anyone here built a house? I think this is a great analogy for your question. So when you build a house, let's say you have a plot of land, what's the first thing you got to do? What's that? Yeah, right at the top, you got to dig down for a foundation, right? Maybe this is a cheesy analogy, but the foundation of your financial plan is savings and no debt. So if you have debt, and I'll rephrase, bad debt. You know, credit cards, student loans, they're not bad debt, you're investing in yourself, right? But you can't do anything else with a student loan, right? Even if you declare bankruptcy, you can't get out of the student loan. So clearing up debt is the #1 thing I have people do when see me in their, you know, recent graduates or something like that. But I like a thumb rule of, if you have an extra $100, take $80, put it on $80 in your savings, because you want to get rid of the debt, but emergencies happen small and large. You blow a tire and it's outside of your normal budget, and now you got to put it on the credit card. Now you're just adding to your debt situation. If you start to build up a little savings by putting up $20 in a savings account, then when you have the tire issue, you can just buy the tire and you don't have to go back to your credit card. So it's a balance. And then as you get closer and closer to having the debt paid off, you can change that ratio to more savings. Ideally, you get to the point where the debt's gone, or at least you've got your path set, you know you're going to get out of it. Savings, we need an emergency bucket of, good thumb rules, 3 months of your fixed expenses. You know, rent, groceries. And who you are, that might be $3,000. It could be 20 grand, right? Especially if you start to add in family and kids and things like that. That's really the building block of it. But once you're through all that and you at least have a path, that's when you can start to talk about investing and, you know, life insurance and disability insurance and all those other things that are going to get to your goals. Since everyone's an individual, it really is important to kind of nail down your specific situation first. There's some really great apps out there. You're going to look at hiring someone like me or Marquita. I'll give you 2 criteria to think about for hiring somebody: competence and trust. The first thing is, you know, are they qualified? And then, is it someone with whom you think you can build trust? because you're gonna have difficult conversations with them. And you wanna trust that they have your best interest at heart. Long answer, and I don't know, I'm sure if that answered your question or not. Yes.
I have a question about, you mentioned putting money in savings. Where is a good place to have a savings account and what?
So while you're looking for a good. Online savings accounts. It's FDI. Anything for that. There are also some other things. Where the relationship that you have is FDIC. Fortunately, nothing. As for losing. But she did. It would be a huge number. Yeah. Think it was, but they did not. Start with the regular savings, then look into. Regular bank, it is like it's still. But like I said, paralysis by analysis.
Right now, unfortunately, most live market or online banks, how you actually get 4+% now. That will go down as the full rates. But it's still important to have. One of the things, if things go back to where you're getting 0.5% from the month market of a high yield savings. Still want to have your emergency fund fully liquid. So we also want to know what your emergency fund should be, so you don't have more than necessary. So you're not missing out on opportunity to some of the cash that they've got $150,000 sitting in the checking account. They need 20,000 in savings. So then it's put to the money that's gonna be more. As we get walked in, I have a PowerPoint to go through if necessary, but I really enjoy doing Q&A much more. I think it's more interesting. But I think so. We rest.
So, like regarding saving money, like opening a savings account will not give you much interest on keeping the money there. Why? Like a flexible CD, put your money into that. You will be getting some interest on the money, but since it's flexible, you can close it whenever you want. What do you think?
Good. And it all goes always back to purpose. what's the purpose for that pot of money? Right, if it's your emergency savings, yeah, absolutely, you know. CD is gonna give you a little more than a savings account always. And if it's flexible, it gives you the opportunity to get out earlier than the term. Even if it's not flexible CD, if you need it in an emergency, you have to pay some of the interest back to the bank as a result of closing it early, who cares? It's an emergency, take it and run. Problem where people got to get too conservative is, and I've seen this, I'll have a 30-year-old come in with an IRA and it's in a CD. Way too conservative for retirement. Because a CD, even if it gets you 4 or 5% right now, you know, that money should have the opportunity to earn much more. Yes, it can go down, but over time, you know, risk versus reward, more risk usually means more reward over time. So yes, to your, but yeah, it's emergency money, absolutely. Something.
That's some requirement, I guess I'm so confused. Can you explain the whole system?
Oh, absolutely. And this, even if you're coming from another country, there's a lot of Americans that really don't understand the system. So it's a great question. The old days of everyone having a pension are kind of over. If you're lucky enough to be a federal employee or state employees and teachers, there's a few jobs left where when you retire, that organization, whether it be government or private, will give you a paycheck every month, a pension, and it's not out of your pocket. You pay into it, but you get a continued paycheck. Those are very, very more and more rare. So it's called, in the IRS code, it's called a defined benefit plan, where they're defining the benefit, the paycheck every month. That's what a pension is. What we transitioned to largely is a defined contribution plan, where you as an employee for the job will contribute to plan, and oftentimes the employer will contribute a little bit as well. 401k is the most common of those types because it's the IRS code for private companies. There's also something called 403bs, there's 457s, and those are all associated with different types of organizations. So your average teacher, for example, will have a 403b because it's the same thing as a 401k, it's just through a municipal government. Following so far? So that's what's provided through employers, is the defined contribution plan. And this year, does anyone know what the limit of a 401k is you put in if you're under 50 years old? So you're thinking of the IRA. You're right on that. It is the IRA limit. It's $23,000 for a full and out of your paycheck. Pre-tax and or usually there's pre-tax and after-tax options, which I'll go over in a second. That's the 401k world. Privately, as a citizen, you can start what's called an IRA, individual retirement. $7,000 limit this year. If you're under 50, if you're over 50, it's 8,000, and if you're over 50 on the 401k, it's 30,500. The IRA is just open by yourself online, or you do it with, advisors like me, Marquita. Then the IRA is a lot more flexible because you can put a lot of different things into it. Whereas a 401k, typically your employer will put together an set of funds you can pick from. That's your only option 99% of the time. There's some that are more flexible, but generally speaking, there'll be 20 funds you pick from, and then, whereas an IRA, there's thousands of things. If you own your own IRA, it's an individually owned account, whereas a 401k is for your employer. That's generally how people save for retirement. So 401k or an IRA. The combination. So if you're self-employed in some fashion, like an independent contractor, you have some additional options. You can actually, depending on how you're set up as a corporation, you can set up your own 401k. There's also something called a SEP IRA and a simple IRA, which are other employer provided plans, but now you're your own employer. So now you have the option of doing those, and they all have their own pros and cons. There's different limits and how you can use them and when you can put money in and take it out, and if you have employees, you have to treat the employees versus yourself. But an independent contract actually opens up a lot more options.
It sound a little confusing, but it,
There's basically when people come in and it's worth hiring like an accountant, an advisor to help you if you want to do it as an independent contractor. Basically could sit down and I can't do it in 30 seconds. You can basically walk through all the options, the pros and cons and which one suits you best based on your ability to pay for it. Because all these things cost money just to have it. So depending on what you want to be able to spend out of your company as an independent contractor, they force one of them to be the best option. If you have money to spend, then it's like, how much and how do you want employees? Are you going to stay by yourself for your career? 401k, generally speaking, is going to be the most flexible. There's $70,000 in there as per year, if you have the cash flow to support it. Simple with SEP, the individual IRAs, they have much lower limits, generally speaking. It's flexibility. Yeah, there's a lot of, if the financial world was so complicated, Marquita and I would mention this. Basically what we do, if the tax code didn't exist and all the rules Congress makes around money didn't exist, we might be behavioral counselors, teach people how to, act better with their money, which is still the majority of what we do anyway. But all these rules, it's basically helping people navigate all the rules. You don't lose your, oh yeah, we'll speak up. You don't lose your 401k. It still sits there and you can move it to an IRA if you wish, but you just don't add. No longer. That answer your question? Yeah. So it's called a rollover. Generally speaking, you've got 4 options when you have an old 401k from an old company. You can leave it there usually forever. There are rules the IRS allows where they can force you out if your balance is too low. Because it costs them money to have you on the books. So a lot of times if it's under 5,000, you'll get a letter saying, if you do something by mistake, we're going to force you out. But barring that, you can keep it there. You can roll it to your current employer's plan. Even if you go from 401k to 403b, you can do that switch. You can move it to an IRA. And then there's always the option of just taking the money out. But if you're under 59 and a half, you're going to face potential penalties for that. Because the IRS, they want you to save for yourself. So the US government doesn't have to pick up your tab when you're in your. They've incentivized you by penalizing you for taking the road. Those are your basic 4 options. It's absolutely leave it. I was going to see if we got a question on it. There was another hand. Yes. Don't know all the rules around that. I don't know about I don't know if it's the right word, the repatriation, so to speak. If you, let's say you worked here for 5 years on a work visa, and you had your, you worked at Intel and you got a 401k and whatnot. If the intent ultimately is to go back to your home country and then live there for the rest of your life, I don't know you could probably take the money, but I don't know, how does it translate through tax structures and things? Because, we have the US tax code, if you're from whatever, and they have a different tax code, what's the agreement between the two countries? I've got one, and he's got a UK pension through his company. So I'm gonna have to navigate that with him, but my understanding is it's country by country. The EU zone might have one agreement with the US. That's kind of an anomaly, right? Most, giant economic aggregates to that extent. So I really honestly don't know. I think that's probably worth just thinking, like, if you had the job with the US company and they have a 401k, the 401k provider might not even, so because their specialty is kind of internal to the US. But I mean, it never hurts to save, but you just don't want it, it goes through some sort of excise tax and you lose half your money because of the excise tax or something. I know there's attorneys out there that specialize in international stuff. That'd be the place I would try to find one of those folks. Abby mentioned that they have, I don't know if it'd be in their wheelhouse, but they might have access to at least resources around that. Just by being an attorney that's familiar with immigration issues and things. I don't know. It's a great question. If you get the answer and you think of me, please send me an email. So the way I think about that is two ways. There's a mathematical answer and there's an emotional answer. So mathematically, if your student loans are at 4% and your mortgage is going to be at 6%, they're both long-term loans, generally speaking. So in that case, I would put the cash to the down payment because you're saving more money by not paying 6% interest on a mortgage. But if we were to go back to a world where mortgages are 3% again, and your student loans are 4%, loan down. The other component of that that's interesting is the mortgage interest rate you get from the bank might be determined by your level of student loans. So if you were to pay your student loans down, you might get a better interest rate from the bank. And that's something a mortgage broker, when you go to actually get the loan, they can run different scenarios for you and say, hey, I got 20 grand. Do I use it as a down payment or do I pay off some student loan balance? And they could tell you, I doubt that it would lower your interest rate enough in that 4% and 6% scenario to make it worth putting it on a student loan. But the other component of it is the asset, right? Your mortgage is held against the physical asset. So you decide you don't want to live there anymore, you can't afford it, you can just sell a house. Student loans, you can't turn your brain back, right? So to some extent, getting rid of the student loan is important for that. I have a client, 2 medical doctors. They have a combined 1 million of student loans. So they're, as many of you know, they're going the public forgiveness route. They're both going to work for a public hospital for 10 years. And they'll end up paying back, I figured that was like $350,000, but the other $650,000 will get forgiven after 10 years. To your point, the emotional kind of component is some people are incredibly debt averse. I've never had any Muslim clients, but I'm told Muslims as a faith can't pay interest. So there's, that's an extreme example of kind of like debt averse persons, but, and if anyone knows more about that, I'd love to know. But basically, some people, they just don't want any debt, right? So I've got some people, they won't buy the house until the student loan's paid off because then they want to, be able to pay more. Definitely an individual scenario question. If you have like, you think $5,000 in student loans, say I'd probably just pay them off regardless of interest rate, just to get them out of the way. Now it's one less monthly payment you got to worry about. They're just going to sit there until it's going, right? that answer your question in a very generic way? Yes.
There isn't necessarily that is better. Right? See what their process is, see what you earn, compare with their rates. Know that we are into, I guess, the is the amount that you would have to bring to the table in order to work with a financial advisor, because we typically there are different fees versus, you know, advisor state. Free, five, and that's the amount that you will invest with. And that's $1 that would go to. For that. So, still on the debt. Services, they may say. How it's. And that's my opinion. We're not seeing it, but it's for the betterment of. So you shouldn't really get hung up on if you don't have the amount of finances that you want to work with, you don't. So different advisors not there.
This is the second part of your question about bank versus independent. Absolutely hire someone who is a fiduciary. They're required to do what's in your best interest. And that could be totally independent of the channel that you're looking at, whether they're independent. Lots of bank advisors that are great advisors. Some that, you know, there's some independent, same thing. So it really is about the person, like I said earlier, someone with whom you can build trust, so that you can have those difficult conversations and work through it. But the fiduciary really is entry level for anyone you want to hire, so that you know they're at least legally required, and if they don't do it, they can get in a lot of trouble. And you also want to look at the type of service they provide. There are people out there who will put themselves out as a financial advisor, an investment manager, or they're really an insurance salesman, or they're really, and that's okay. Just as long as you understand what you're getting out of them Because some of them are captive agents, right? They'll sell life insurance and they'll have investment services, but really they make their bulk of their money from insurance. And that's fine, just as long as you understand what their motivation is, so that you know if you're getting what you want out of it. Because if they're really mainly an insurance salesman and you're asking for retirement advice, maybe that's not the person you want. Maybe you want a full service financial advisor. There's actually, within the industry, there is I don't know if they're actually lawsuits, but there's a couple of our, every profession has professional organizations. They're trying to get legally defined what a financial advisor, if you want to call yourself a financial advisor, what you have to. Right, like I'm a certified financial planner. I'm allowed to use that mark because of services I offer. But I couldn't use it. So it's really about the relationship you're going to have with this person, and whether you trust them or not, and then value. Because I honestly, a couple of years ago, I fired a client. Every time they came in, they were asking me about the fee on the investment. And I have no problem sharing what I make. It's only fair for the client to know. It was like 3 or 4 years in a row. And so it finally occurred to me what they were really asking was what value would you get from seeing any value. So it's the only person I've ever had to do this, but I told them, I said, look, I don't think I'm the right advisor for you. Even if you find another advisor that charges the same amount, if you're happy with what they're giving you, great. But we never got to the point of being able to do financial planning because they were so concerned about the fee. They never got any advice from me. It was unfair of me to continue to charge them. So I said, go find somebody, I'll help you move the money. Time when you move money to an advisor, the new advisor pulls the money. I helped them. I pushed it because it was right for them. And that goes to the relationship. Whatever, there was some roadblock between me and the client. Over them. But it's real. I mean, we're human, right? Sometimes just, it's like dating. You have two perfectly nice people. It doesn't mean they got to get married. So, yes, so yeah, exactly. Today's financial investment management world works. Most advisors charge a percentage fee on the money you have invested with them. And you're right, then your interests are kind of aligned, right? Because if I'm making 1% of 100 grand and I make $1,000 a year, and the next year I do something wonderful in your account, and now it's worth $150,000, and now I make $1,500. First, I make less. I think that's worse. Our interests are aligned. That's the newer model. Last 10 years or so, that's what everyone's been moving toward. There are less expensive ways to charge, but it's like commissions. And I always tell clients, either way, your advisor is making money. There's no free lunch, and there are pro bono advisors, right? They're going to make money. It's a business, so you just really understand how you're paying them and making sure you're fine. Yeah, again. Oh, that one. Term. So pure, like if you just put 100 grand in, let's just say you invest up in $1,000. When is it going to be worth more than 100,000, so to speak? That depends a lot on the stock market. I mean, 2022, the market as in the calendar year lost money. This year to date, we're up 25-30%. So it depends on timing. I had a client who was in a way a very sad story. She lost her husband. He died at 45, but he had life insurance, so she got. So I spent about 3 or 4 months with her developing a plan for how she was going to support herself and live, and what we were going to do with the money to make all that happen. I did it over a couple of weeks. And 2021. I just said 2022 was a bad year. Her $1.5 million went to 1.2. I felt horrible. I have no control over the stock market. And so luckily we've set it up in risk buckets. So the money she needed didn't. It's the accounts have returned to their value. It just took some time. To answer your question, it really goes back to you want, and it's really about the CD, right? If it's money you know you're going to need in this next 3, 6, 9 months, maybe even like 2, 3, that's money you should not invest. Because the stock market can turn so quickly up and down in a short period of time. If it's long-term, retirement money, or buy a house in 15 years, or send your kids to college in 20 years, whatever it might be, it's long-term money. Yeah, make it risky, because if it goes up and down right now, who cares? You're not using it right now. Say it just depends on the time frame the investment is intended. And then the other component, this is not scientific, but I read this one book about investing, and the author surmised that a good financial advisor is worth about 4% a year in returns. And not because they're picking the right stocks for you or the mutual funds, they're coaching you through good decisions with your money. Hey, I just got a raise. What do I do with my money? Well, let's invest some, have a little more fun, what to eat once more a week, whatever. Some of those behavioral type questions is where I would argue our value really is. Because then we can coach you through the rules, as I was talking about 20 minutes ago. We can, help you make the decisions about, I got extra money, but I put it on my house or my student loan. I get those calls probably once or twice a week. And it's urged for that. That's why most advisors make their money by managing investments and charging them 1%. Does that answer your question?
So, as fiduciaries, like you said, we work and know that recommendations that we make, like benefits for us and the company. So it's sort of like.
So here's an example. Let's say you agree on I'm going to put away $500 a month in an IRA for my retirement. We sit down and go, okay, we've got these 2 investments that you can choose from, A and B. And they're equal in every way but cost. I must recommend the cheaper one. Recommend something more expensive. There has to be some additional service, some component, something that gives you more value. I can't just say, oh, well, I make $100 on this one and $200 on this one, so I'm going to sell the $200. In the old days, you could do that. Has anyone seen Wall Street, Charlie Sheen? There's a new Wall Street, I don't know, 10 years old now. It's a good investing stock movie. But anyway, they make all their money off of selling stocks. It's commissions, right? They were trying to sell as much as possible, so they get as much commission as possible. They don't have to consider whether it's good for the client or not. Then you say, I want to put some money in an IRA. In the fiduciary world, I have to give you the best value product for that IRA. I just have to give you something that's retirement-like. I could just make more money. It's weird to think about that it took the industry so long to get to the point where they're like, why don't we make it so advisors have to do its best interest? I know the first one who really pushed it was Obama back in. Wanted to make under his SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission, the fiduciary standard, national level standard, and it failed because the way they wrote the rule in addition, it was good. But the way they wrote the rule, no advisor would ever see anybody worth less than a couple $1 million. They put a lot of risk on the advisor. Remember I told you, like, we don't control the stock market, some people times think. If you lost money, the advisor might be personally liable. It got killed, but then it got reinstituted. It stayed around. Actually, under Trump's his term in 2006, they ended up coming up with something called regulation best interest, and old level, way up, much closer to this year. It's a really big deal. And that's what, if you remember one word about hiring somebody, fiduciary. Yes. To deliver a quarterly dividend sort of thing. Is this long-term money or if you're investing for the long term? So there's lots of, there's a couple ways you could approach it. The mutual fund world, there are some mutual funds that are built specifically to issue dividends. That's their goal. If they grow as well, that's a secondary goal. But their primary goal is to give the investor a monthly report. Yeah, well, most advisors or bank advisors who have access to the world of mutual funds. And the other thing you do is if you want to go individual stocks, which is riskier because individual stocks can change their tune actually a broader way, right? Because a mutual fund, if there's 100 stocks in a mutual fund, one of them changes something, you got 99 other ones who haven't. If you just own one or two stocks, pay dividends, and one of them changes, now your strategies interrupted. But there are plenty of stocks that pay good dividends. You just got to be a little more careful with talking like $10,000. You might be able to put together 3 or 4 stocks, but if you put $10,000 into a mutual fund, 300 stocks, right? So, but there's lots of things out there that are built to give you this very specific return. Most of the time, if you're young, you just haven't reinvested. But that they need income. You put it in something and it just take the income out and spend. Yeah, you can absolutely do that. Just keep in mind, there are vehicles out there that will guarantee it. You're probably too young for this, but like an annuity, where you put money in and it's to an insurance company and then they promise you money back every month or however you want it. It's guaranteed. It's a contractual guarantee. You go into the investment world, there's a couple of funds that have been doing it a very long time, but there's no guarantee that it's coming from. More risk generally means more reward.
I didn't want to say I have an analogy for it. The elevator. Yeah. Other stocks. Mutual fund. Okay. That stock.
plummet.
That will support your portfolio. It, um, think about.
The follow-up. So, I think that case of one senior grads and this soon some start from the beginning with having term investment. So like what's the terminologies? So like, okay. Like for someone who doesn't know what's a mutual fund, for example, like what's a ETF, for example, stuff like that. The terminologies we are looking for to like define such that gives monthly or quarter. And whether it's low or high, but it's gonna come as a dividend.
Yeah.
Still guaranteed income, but it's more of a long term.
Yes, let me, so let me start with something that I think will be helpful. So, I guess let me start here. So what is a stock? Buy stock. You actually get a certificate. And it's proof that you own one share of Apple. Okay? That means you have a right to vote with that. For one share of Apple, your vote's basically irrelevant, right? I mean, shares out there. So when like Musk took over Twitter, now X, right? He actually made it as a publicly traded company, but he bought up enough shares to be the controlling owner. Actually, I don't know the details. I don't know if he bought all the shares or was enough, but he basically spent $40 billion on how it controls, he makes the decisions. When you buy shares on the stock market, that's basically your value is based on whether the company does better or worse. Company goes out of business, you know, might have value in that stock depending on how they liquidate. That's owning the stock. Then there's a bond. So an investment, but it's no different from getting a loan, right? So when a company takes a loan from investors, that's all a bond is. So if you buy a treasury bond or a bond from Apple, you're lending them money in return for the principal and interest back. In the bond world, interest is indicative of risk. So if the US government issues bonds, they have the privilege of US economy. 99% sure is still the largest. China's catching up, but I'm pretty sure the US is still the largest. So they have the most ability to tax to pay back those bonds, right? So the US government's not going to default, in other words, right? So they don't pay them. Whereas if a country is struggling financially with the closing, they issue bonds. As an investor, you're going to be much more worried about their ability to pay you back, right? High interest rate. Same with companies, you know, and all of these are going to be more than the U.S. government bonds. But that's bonds. Now, mutual funds is another investment vehicle. What happens here is, say I come along and I've got $100 a month to invest, buy a portfolio of stocks and bonds. Well, it's not gonna buy me that much. If I'm lucky, I might be able to buy a couple of shares of stock. I can't buy one bond. Most bonds are issued in $1,000 increments. So I can't do it, but if I give my $100 a month to a mutual fund, and so do hundreds of thousands of other people. Now that mutual fund has 100,000 people times $1 a month, or, basically $1 million, $10 million to invest and pick these things. So the mutual fund will have what's called a prospectus, and they'll find what that mutual fund invests in. For big companies, small, international. So you as a small time investor, which is what most of us are. Most of us aren't Elon Musk and have $4 in my Twitter. So you give them your $100 or even your $100,000, right? That's still small time investor in this sense. And buy a smattering of stocks and bonds. So when you go to talk to financial advisor and you say, I want to invest for retirement or this other goal that's 10 years down the line, they should be taking that information and saying, what's your name? Like, so Michael wants, I'm just gonna make up stuff. Michael's 30 years old and he wants to retire at 55 and he wants to buy a house in 10 years. So he said he has $1,000 a month to invest. That advisor should say, okay, well, he wants to buy this house, he wants to retire. How do I split up $1,000? And what basket of securities, whether they're mutual funds, ETFs are basically another form of mutual fund for today's purposes. It's an hour conversation in a way, but ETF stocks or bonds can I put together that will have the right risk reward relationship and it'll get him to his goal. Does he need a 10% return? Does he need a 5% return to get to this goal? And then if I say, I know if you need a 10% return, I have to make this stuff risky to try to get 10%. Which means that every time I'm not going to out like they have in the past in the stock market, things go up and down, but the trend up. So I can try to get you that 10%. Whereas if it's a goal with 5%, I don't have to do this risky. So to your point, what questions do I ask? What words do I use? You should go in with, here's my goal. I want to save for retirement or a house or whatever it might be. And then the advisor can pick which security is appropriate. Either fiduciary responsibility, like we talked about, to get you to them. Does that make sense?
Some goals were like, yes, this is my end goal for the long term, and I can say, I also want some mini goals, sub goals too. Options.
Yes.
Provides this.
Yep.
So
Yeah, there's some things you can do that'll kill two birds with one stone, so to speak, sometimes people come and they don't have a defined. They say, I know I want to invest. And then I might say, okay, well, let's pick something that's in the middle. It's not super risky. It's not no risk. But if you need it, it's not going to go up and down as much, but it'll still give you some opportunity for return for the long. It tends to be as life goes on, you kind of define those goals more and more because, things happen. You get married, have kids, you move job, you move, whatever it might be. Where are you going with it? That's a much better answer. Take that entirely.
No, you answer was something.
She's right. It's our job, just like going to see a lawyer or something. You don't need to go to law school to talk to them. here's my issue, here's my goal, here's my problem, and they can help you.
Invest.
I think that's it.
So it's 1:30. I don't want to keep our speakers any longer because they've got money to make for their clients, right?
We'll stick around for a few minutes if you want. Some questions on it.
Yeah, well, please join me in thanking John, Marquita for their time.
Thank you.
So nice to come back to
Thank you
you.
very much.
Welcome. So thank you all for coming today. Grab a slice or two of pizza on the way out, even if you've already had some because I over ordered. And next week, we have another in-person workshop in this room. All details will be in that workshop email that you're gonna get tomorrow, so look out for that. So have a great week, everyone. Hope to see you next week. Where did Zoom go? Oh, thank you. Hmm. So strange. I'm trying to stop the recording. Oh, there it is.
That's cool.
You sure